Hello. Thanks everyone for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started with the April 28th, 2020 special board meeting. First off, I'm going to do a call to order, and I'm sorry we're late, but it is 6:20 p.m. And I'm going to do a roll call. When I say the board member's name, if you would say present, that would be great. I'm going to start with Eric Joyce.
Present.
Raquel Alvarez.
Present.
Mike Blessing.
Present.
Eleanor Evans.
Present.
Thank you. All right. Public, I'm going to start out with 2C, public report of action taken. Oh, actually, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Sorry. So, Dr. Vitale, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
It would be my pleasure.
Thank you. So now we'll do item 2C, public report of action taken in closed session. The board unanimously voted to appoint Teresa Richmond as the new principal of Santa Margarita Elementary School, effective July 1st, 2020. And that was a 5-0 vote. So we're going to move on to the main event today. We're going to start out with 3A, business services. This will be a presentation with this item. And so I'm going to call on Dr. Soto to go ahead and do this presentation while the board mutes themselves. You're on.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity for us to present tonight SLR Garrison Facilities Update. Thank you, Mr. Moon, for getting the presentation up and ready to go. And just so point of reference, I will let Mr. Moon know when I need the slides forwarded. So with that, good evening, President Blessing, Superintendent Vitale, and esteemed board. Tonight, staff will be presenting updated information during this facility update. Before we begin, I want to take a moment and introduce key staff that will be presenting information or available for questions if needed. District staff present is our Director of Maintenance and Operations and Facilities, Mitch Maynard, our Interim Project Manager, Josh Meyer. Representing our bond program is Penny McGrew from CCM Moss. And lastly, calling in will be Dr. Kathy Fitzgerald from PlaceWorks. So with that, let's move on to the agenda. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of our agenda for this evening. Our facilities update will include updated assessment information for modernization options, in addition to a recommendation this evening. So the next slide. This is a list, a comprehensive list of all of the notifications, in addition to the assessments and site visits with regards to Garrison and staff board presentations as we move along this process. So since February 14th, we have been having the same conversation and adding in new information as it becomes available. Next slide, please. So let's begin with where we left off. This was our options that we presented to the board during the January 14th board study session. Next slide. So to summarize the opportunities presented, opportunity A was the storm drain was addressed and a mini modernization at Garrison, with the Garrison scholars returning back to Garrison. SLR scholars would remain at SLR. For opportunity B, Garrison would be placed into asset management, and the Garrison scholars would remain at SLR or move to neighboring school based on the area of residence. For opportunity C, the storm drain would be addressed at Garrison, and due to declining enrollment, SLR placed into asset management. The SLR scholars would be moved to Garrison or neighboring schools. And lastly, we presented to the board opportunity D, that due to declining enrollment and the storm drain concerns at Garrison, both SLR and Garrison will be placed into asset management and scholars moved to neighboring schools. Next slide, please. So let's discuss option A with the storm drain at Garrison removed, redesigned, and reconstructed with new information. Next slide, please. So Garrison Elementary, next slide. This is our aerial view of the campus of Garrison. Next slide, please. So some facts about Garrison. Built in the 1970s, as mentioned, it is amongst the oldest elementary schools and has not been modernized. As you can see from the seabeds enrollment listed, Garrison has experienced declining enrollment and is anticipated to continue with the decline for the next foreseeable future. The current seabeds enrollment of 324 scholars for the current year represents the number of scholars at SLR. Seabeds is a specific snapshot in time on the first Wednesday in October. You'll notice, according to our demographers, Garrison is expecting ongoing declining enrollment with an anticipated enrollment of 292 scholars for the next school year, 2021. Next slide, please. This graphic was previously shown to the board as a visual depiction of the deterioration and blockage of the storm drain. The grid on the right indicates that the red lines are where the storm drain is in poor condition. The yellow lines are blocked with debris, and lastly, the purple indicates fair condition. The sinkholes and depressions are indicated with the red circles. Next slide, please. So new to Garrison Elementary School are new areas of depressions reported by our security, Rancho Santa Fe, on Saturday, April 18th. This is near the Kinder area. So this is in the area that's opposite really where the storm drain is having our major concerns. So these are new slides. Next slide, please. For option B, this assumes that Garrison will be placed into asset management and scholars would remain at SLR or neighboring schools. Transportation would not be provided. Next slide, please. The assumption of the sale for Garrison property is at $6 million. This is based on a current condition, or what we'd call as is. The single family residential housing would be good for the district as it potentially brings in enrollment and removes facility liability. Next slide, please. So moving on to Sandler Array, as we begin again with another aerial picture, this time of Sandler Array. Next slide, please. So some facts about San Luis Rey Elementary, built in 1963. And like Garrison, it is one of two oldest elementary schools that has not been modernized. As you can see from the Seabeds enrollment data, SLR also has experienced declining enrollment with a projected enrollment of 247 scholars for the 2021 school year. Right now, the Garrison scholars are on the SLR campus, and relocatables were recently added to assist with flexibility of space. Next slide, please. For comparison and evaluation of facility capacity, projected enrollment of SLR and Garrison combined is 539 scholars. Just for point of reference, the state capacity for SLR is 750 scholars. Next slide, please. So since the January Facilities Board study session, staff was asked for a further evaluation of SLR due to the environmental factors. To discuss the assessments conducted, I'd like to introduce our Director of Facilities, Maintenance and Operation, Mitch Maynard, who will then introduce Kathy Fitzgerald from PlaceWorks.
Good evening, Board. Dr. Vitale. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we had an environmental study done of SLR to determine if there's any environmental hazards potentially keeping us from modernization. So here to discuss the report is Dr. Kathy Fitzgerald from PlaceWorks.
We're going to stop sharing for just a second so I can bring Dr. Fitzgerald in.
Okay, thank you. He's trying to get her on.
Fitzgerald, you should be on now. It'll be easier if we unmute her. Okay, Dr. Fitzgerald, thank you for waiting.
Hello?
Okay, Dr. Fitzgerald, you're all set.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, board members and Dr. Vitale. Placework was tasked with doing the CDE Title V studies, and there are two different criteria. One is for new schools, and there's a series of different issues that you go through and determine how close it is to a freeway, how close it is to an airport, and there are certain setbacks that CDE requires for new schools. However, they also have criteria for modernization of existing schools, and that is to not exacerbate any existing conditions or hazards. So we conducted a geological and environmental hazard assessment report, going through all of the bullet items that you see on the screen. And there were three areas that required a little further analysis and investigation. One was the school sited in close proximity to State Route 76. And so we did a health risk assessment to evaluate emissions from cars and diesel trucks along the State Route 76 to see if there were any potential hazards to the students and staff. And it turns out that there is no risk. All of the criteria and the emissions are all below what CDE would consider hazardous. Then we also did a pipeline safety hazard analysis, which looks at all pipelines that are within 1,500 feet of the school site. And there are 2 natural gas pipelines and 2 petroleum product pipelines within 1,500 feet. The nearest pipeline is about 460 feet away. Again, we did the study and looked at the CDE criteria, and the pipelines would not pose a risk to students or staff at that elementary school. The final issue was proximity to high voltage transmission lines. And there are 2 250 kV transmission lines that border the site on the north and east. For new schools, you would be required to set back any classrooms approximately 150 feet from these transmission lines, or you could apply for an exemption from CDE and implement EMF, electromagnetic field reduction strategies if you were going to construct buildings within that zone. However, for a modernization project, the criteria is to not exacerbate existing conditions. So if you don't build any classrooms or play fields closer to the transmission lines than currently exist, you meet that criteria. We did an EMF survey at the school site, and the concentrations were somewhat elevated within the setback zone as compared to background, but they're within the range of exposure levels to computer screens or TVs or kitchen appliances. And outside the setback zone, the EMF levels decrease significantly with distance from the lines. We were comparable to background levels. So CDE doesn't have any criteria for acceptable exposure levels to EMF. And there are many scientific and epidemiological studies that show no conclusive evidence that there are health issues associated with EMF exposure. But CDE has applied what they call the precautionary principle, and they're just looking to limit EMF exposure if possible. So our recommendation, if there's going to be modernization and construction within 150 feet of the currently existing transmission lines, that the district implement EMF reduction strategies. For example, use low EMF computer screens, or make sure with a certified electrician that there are no stray currents in order to just reduce EMF levels as much as possible. And that ends my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Fitzgerald. We appreciate that information. Next slide, please. So the following areas would be addressed for San Luis Rey under this option. and this project would then be considered a bond project. To discuss the currently identified SLR improvements is our bond program manager, Penny McGrew from CCM Moss. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Soto. Good evening, board members, Dr. Vitale. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this information for you tonight. As part of the assessment at SLR for a potential modernization, we identified some immediate needs, which you see before you. We also hired an architectural firm to assist us in further defining the scope, starting with what would be required through the state architect. They look at fire life safety, structural and access compliance. We then asked ourselves, what could we do to this campus in a modernization that would bring it up to a 21st century learning environment? We then created a high-level summary of what could be accomplished under a modernization at San Luis Rey. Next slide, please. Our summary shows that the entire site could be touched, including the front entry and providing swing space or interim housing, which is the last bullet on the slide, to house scholars and staff during construction. The cost estimate that we received from the architect was between $17 and $20 million. And on the right, you see the pie chart gives you an estimated timeline for that modernization of 36 months. We may be able to shave some of that time off during construction once we were able to get into the design of the project. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take just a minute and talk to you about what a modernization is and why we do it. In a nutshell, a modernization is ultimately the goal is to provide a better learning environment for our scholars and our faculty. During design, architects use the term form follows function. This means that the design of a modernization is driven by the educational goals. It'll be imperative to get input from those that will be in the spaces to understand how they function. You've heard me use the term 21st century learning. When modernizing a campus, this typically means what you see on the bullets on the left. Technology is not just computers. It's tablets, smartboards, TV, and projection set up in a flexible way. The type of seating, natural lighting, and having the room feel comfortable and temperature are all important factors. Besides making our facilities look new and pretty, why we do it is highlighted by the bullets to the right. No longer do students sit in a single desk in a row and listen to a teacher lecture. 21st century learning is more collaborative and technology-based. In order for that to happen, the facility has to be able to provide that type of space. Mitch Maynard will share with you some of the modernizations at other sites that have recently been done. This will give you an idea of how transformative a modernization can be. Mitch?
Thank you, Penny. Next slide, please. So as you can see, our first slide is Del Rio, and this was done under Prop H. And as you can see from the pictures above, Del Rio had a complete transformation. The actual entrance of the site was moved off of Parker and moved to North River Road. And it was created in a way that gave a better 21st century learning environment to the students and staff. Next slide, please. So Santa Margarita, very 60s style architecture, very traditional learning environment. And as you can see, after the modernization, key features and key architectural points specifically are the NPR. As you can see, it's a complete transformation. It gives that curb appeal from the site and perspective of the community, and also creates a open and lofty style architecture design within the area. Next slide, please. Libby. Libby looks very similar to SLR, the layout. So as you can remember, Libby looked very, very similar. The front of the site actually had the NPR laid out very similar to the way that SLR is laid out. And as you move to the bottom slide, you can see that the front of the school has given a very defined entry and exit point, which is highly desirable. Again, open feel, natural light available, giving that 21st century learning environment. Next slide, please. Mission. Look at Mission. Mission looks almost identical to what the DO looked like. So again, you can see the complete transformation of the way that Mission looked like into what it looks like now. It is now one of our flagship sites. It gives you that very natural light that's very, very desirable in the area. The architectural key pieces are very, very modern and very, very form follows function. Next slide, please. Same thing with PalmQuest. As you can see, it looked very 1960-esque. And as we move down to the bottom slides, again, just delivering those products that are the form follows function model, which are very desirable in all the new modernization facilities. So now to talk about option C, I would like to hand it back over to Dr. Soto.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So option C is where the storm drain at Garrison is removed, redesigned, and reconstructed on our property, meaning not the hillside nor the output at the end of the property line. Due to declining enrollment, SLR would be placed in asset management and scholars moved to Garrison or neighboring schools. Again, transportation would not be available. So with that, I'd like to reintroduce Penny McGrew from CCM Moss to discuss Garrison Elementary School. Next slide, please.
This slide is really just a recap of what we presented to you in January. As a reminder, the storm drain would have to be addressed before we could do any modernization. The cost we presented, which was $13 million, did not include any permitting costs because we just have no way of knowing that in advance. And it did not address any other city or state entities. The pie chart shows you the breakdown for the cost of the work, with the majority of the cost being labor. As a reminder from the January board, we are bound by public contract code, and that means we have to pay prevailing wage on all of our school district projects, which makes them a little more expensive than the private industry. If we were to do this, again, this would be paid out of bond funds. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Soto.
Next slide, please. So just like at Garrison, we had a property evaluation, same for SLR. You'll notice that this one came in at 5.9 million. Garrison was at 6, very similar in nature. So again, same similar size, similar property evaluation. Next slide, please.
Can I just say something for just a second? For those watching, that rough order of magnitude, the cost that was broken down there, the 13 million, is just to get Garrison drain set. It's not to modernize Garrison as a school, correct? So comparing that to the price tag that was put on option B would not be a fair comparison. That would just be the beginning of getting Garrison ready to modernize.
You're absolutely correct, Trustee Joyce. That is exactly what it is. It's just to start addressing underneath the ground, knowing that we have done nothing for the actual site itself for modernization.
And the timeline with that would be much longer than 36 months?
That would be the timeline just for the storm drain. After the storm drain is addressed, then we could start looking at considering modernization for Garrison. Okay, next slide, please. So you'll notice here that the this option D is where the Garrison scholars and SLR scholars would then be moved to the neighboring schools. The 3 closest schools to Garrison and SLR are Fusat, Mission, and PalmQuest. Next slide, please. So this map depicts the home residence of each scholar attending either Garrison or SLR as of February 1st, 2020. The green dots are the scholars' homes. So you'll notice that they are depicted on both sides of the map, one for Garrison, one for San Luis Rey. So you can see where they're spread out a little bit. Next slide, please. Great. Thank you, Mr. Moon. Again, under option D, this would assume that the SLR, oh, next slide, please.
There's a significant lag at the moment, so please
That's okay.
just a little bit of patience. I can see what you're seeing, and it's different than what I have.
Does anybody have, any of the board members have a question about what this looks like?
Okay, moving on. Again, option D, this is where the SLR and Garrison scholars would go to PalmQuest. Based upon the previous map, about 135 scholars were identified, and this is the grade breakdown of where each scholar, how they would be affected. So again, this would also include 6 classrooms and 1 set of restrooms to be addressed at FUSAT, with the assumption that 30 students per classroom and currently no available classroom space. Next slide, please. Mr. Moon, one more. Perfect. Mission. Excellent. Thank you. Under this option, the following SLR or Garrison scholars would be moved to Mission for school year 2021. 6 classrooms, again, and 1 set of restrooms would need to be addressed at Mission. This would address the 167 scholars that would be then moved over to Mission Elementary School. Next slide, please. And lastly, at PalmQuest, this option for SLR or Garrison scholars would go to PalmQuest with 135 scholars being moved to PalmQuest, sorry. Again, 6 more classrooms and 1 set of restroom would be needed at that site. So the next slide now shows that this map indicates that under option D, SLR and Garrison would be both placed into asset management, and they're removed from the attendance boundary map as indicated on this map. To discuss the classroom and restroom needs at the 3 sites, I will reintroduce Penny McGrew to discuss that next step.
Thank you, Dr. Soto. So to allow for additional, next slide, please. To allow for additional scholars at FUSAT, Mission, and PalmQuest, additional classrooms would be provided. This too would be paid out of bond funds. We looked at 3 different types of buildings: portables, prefabricated buildings, and traditional stick buildings. The estimated cost would range from $7 million to $15 million. The portables have a lifespan of about 10 years, and the prefab and the design build have a lifespan anywhere between 30 and 50, depending on how well they were maintained. Cost of ownership comes into play in this, so as long as they were efficient and low maintenance as possible, they would last longer. The bar to the left shows the difference in timeline depending on the type of building, and the portables are quickest. There's about a 5-month difference between prefab and design bid build. The bars to the right show the estimated cost. While portables are the cheapest option, they also have the least amount of time that they hold up. Prefab, you can get done a little bit cheaper, but it costs a little bit more. So while we save a little bit of time doing the prefab, we would also spend a little bit more money. So I'll turn it back over to Dr. Soto.
Real quick on that though, on doing these types of portables or designs and the bid bills and things like that, what kind of maintenance are we looking at for each type of those buildings over the years, and what would those costs look like?
I don't have those costs in front of me. I can get back to you on those, but just typically your general M&O things. So you would want to put into your deferred maintenance plan roofs, servicing your HVACs, your electrical, your plumbing, all of those different types of maintenance that would normally occur. In portables, unfortunately, because they're a different type of product, they just naturally have a shorter shelf life, if you will.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Penny. Next slide, please. Awesome. So thank you. Since our January board study session, we provided various opportunities to receive community input regarding the 4 options. Next slide, please. Input was received through community forum meetings on both February 4th and February 5th, along with a community survey. 3 emerging themes were noted. Keep SLR, Garrison scholars, and staff together. Provide a clean, safe school. And lastly, consider an additional option, which would be to purchase property and build a new school. Next slide, please. So for option E, staff reviewed multiple properties for possible purchase. At this time, I'd like to introduce Interim Project Manager Josh Meyer to report out on these properties. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Soto. Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Vitale. As mentioned, we researched all available and undeveloped land in the area for district consideration. These opportunities were then evaluated with the limitations identified by the CDE for new construction. This slide illustrates what some of those limitations are. Next slide, please. The CDE recommends 10.2 acres of total land for elementary schools with up to 600 scholars. That increases to 14.6 acres for up to 800 scholars. Usable acreage must be consistent with CDE's recommended numbers unless circumstances such as insufficient land, environmental hazards, or excessive distance from scholars exist. Sites that do not meet the usable acreage recommendations will be subject to providing a physical education plan and other supporting documentation. Next slide, please. The City of Oceanside's Deputy City Manager provided us a list of available properties that came closest to meeting our acreage and proximity parameters. However, most of them are deficient in acreage and some of them also present environmental hazards. The first 2 properties are the only parcels identified as still available in the El Corazon area, but this first one was in escrow and both fall considerably short of our acreage needs. The area pictured is located directly north of the new townhomes that were built off of Rancho Del Oro Road and El Corazon Drive. Next slide, please. Here's the second El Corazon property, which is across from where you would turn to enter the El Corazon Sports Fields and Senior Center off of Seagate Way. Please keep in mind it does not meet CDE's size recommendations. Next slide, please. This property is currently a nursery on Oceanside Boulevard between the concrete plant and Orco Block, but it does not meet the acreage recommendations and it's well within 1,500 feet of the Sprinter Track easement. Next slide, please. This property is located adjacent to our cemetery near the San Luis Rey Mission, and at just under 4 acres, it's still not meeting CDE's size recommendations. Next slide, please. Here's another available property that was presented to us off of Kelly Street that doesn't meet our acreage needs. Next slide, please. This is a small property that would be an expansion of Ocean Shores. But even once expanded, it would only be about 5 acres total, and there's a power line on the property as well as sprinter tracks within 1,500 feet. Next slide, please. This property lies just east of In-N-Out and 24-Hour Fitness off of Old Grove Road in Frazee, and again would not meet CDE's recommended acreage. Next slide. This is the only available property that was presented by the City of Oceanside that meets CDE's size recommendations. However, the topography is described as a rolling hillside and building conditions are not ideal. Next slide, please. The final property evaluated was off of Highway 76 and Fusat, and there was more than enough land, but it's already fully developed. While community input spurred the idea of considering property acquisition, the cost of acquiring new property and wait time on acquisition hinders us from researching additional property, as we believe it is in the best interest to not recommend option E for board consideration. Now I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Soto for our staff recommendation.
Thank you, Joshua. Appreciate that assistance. Moving on to the recommendation. Next slide, please. So the recommendation coming from staff this evening is to recommend option B. This is where Garrison would be placed into asset management, and that a change would be all SLR and Garrison scholars and staff would remain at SLR. SLR and Garrison scholars would be eligible for intra-district transfer if requested, and that SLR site improvements would begin with existing bond funds. So with that, staff is happy to entertain any questions, and we now move to board discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Soto, and everyone else. I'd like to open it up for public comment before we start a board discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Ann Givens and Greg Moon to start public comment. Public comment rules remain the same. We're happy to receive the comments about items and issues on tonight's specific agenda, as well as topics within our jurisdiction. Each person may speak for up to 3 minutes. We'd like to see you when you speak or see your name, and we'll have Greg Moon keep track of the time and the 3 minutes, and he'll give you a 15-second warning. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over right now. Ann?
Hi. Okay, we have 5 comments on 3A. The first one will be Victoria Mariani.
Okay.
Give me a 30-second warning.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Vitale, esteemed board members, staff, students, and community. I am Victoria Mariani, 5th grade teacher and 20-year employee of OUSD. I'm speaking tonight on the Garrison San Luis Rey facility issue. Our Seagator staff has made lemonade out of lemons this year, and we continue to move in a positive direction, merging our staff, students, and greater communities. We stand before you tonight to humbly remind you of our desire to remain together as one entity and graciously ask that our scholars receive an equitable facility that makes good on the promises of 3 prior superintendents and governing boards. We ask this on behalf of our students and their families because as dedicated educators, we truly believe in advocating for the needs of our scholars. We believe that the school board and the district leaders understand the gravity of this endeavor, and we are passionate about working with you to bring this lofty goal to fruition. Please do not misconstrue our motives. We are not victims who are bent on endless complaining, nor are we self-serving tyrants searching for a Camelot school to surpass all others. We only ask that our community receive a neighborhood school within our current boundaries that is safe and comparable to the most recently modernized or rebuilt schools in the district. We will not be quiet about the inherent problems at either current site out of fear that if we do, both schools will be permanently closed and our staff and students splintered. We are not victims and we will not act as such. Our staff expressed an interest in Buddy Todd Park, and we were told by Dr. Vitale that it is not a viable option. We hope to hear why it is not a viable option tonight. And more importantly, we hope that tonight our respected school board members will commit to finding a solution that will meet the needs of our deserving Super Seagator scholars while preserving our stellar programs such as Student Ambassadors, Theater Club, the Dual Immersion Language Program, and Seagator News. No matter what the outcome of tonight's meeting, we will remain dedicated to our students, their families, and each other. And we will continue to serve Oceanside Unified School District with excellence and perseverance. Thank you so much for your time and attention this evening.
Thank you, Victoria Mariani.
Next speaker, Michael Real.
Stand by.
That's one of the few benefits to leaving your
Hold on, Mike, give us a second to work with
Oh,
technology. I
already-
want to make sure you get the full 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you.
Hey, Mike.
I was already going. I was halfway through.
I'm so sorry. We really want to hear you. Do you mind starting over?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you for your patience.
Okay. Michael Rail, Seagator teacher and resident of Oceanside. Good morning, good evening, esteemed school board trustees. There was an email sent out to you regarding research we have completed regarding the opportunities, and they will be referenced, but we won't be able to get all the way through, but I'm willing to answer any questions that we do have. It is amazing to reflect on our reconstruction process and where it has taken us. According to our district's long-range facility master plan, Garrison and San Luis Rey schools have been at the top of our bond projects listed since 2016. However, history tells us that it's been nearly 2 decades that both schools have been promised a remodel. Yet it still seems to feel that our existence continues to be a burden for those who may not share our same perspectives. However, I know in my heart, I still believe we all have the same goals, and I hope that we can mark the day that we become united as a Seagator district in this project. Thank you, Dr. Soto, for your presentation. Your thoroughness and focus on data helps me line up our obstacles and begin finding solutions. There continues to be major environmental issues with the current zoning of San Luis Rey as a permanent site for our students of Oceanside. Between the power lines, the gas line, the flight path, 76 Highway, Mission Avenue, and El Camino, it is nearly impossible to remedy all the environmental impacts that bring the school site up to 21st century regulations. Although we may be grandfathered into previous public health regulation, does not change the fact that the issues are apparent at the school site and will continue to be a health issue in the future. The more research we do, the more questions I have raised, such as, when the airport was moved its flight path in 1962, did the city know that there was going to be a school there? Why did the school district build a school directly under the flight path? And what did Superintendent Noonan mean when he said that San Luis Rey and Garrison were throwaway sites? When the 36 Seagator teachers signed a letter to Dr. Vitale, we wanted her to know that we are all in with this process and will do everything it takes to work with her to create a school for our entire school district. However, I'm disappointed that Dr. Vitale did not elaborate on the reasoning she did not believe that it was a viable site. Whether we reach out through email, verbal question, in a meeting with staff, or public board meeting, we are given broad perspectives or left to wait until the last possible moment. This I have noticed is consistent with many of her administrators, excluding Dr. Soto. However, we will continue to search for a space where we can all work together as one. Board trustees, it is time for us to come together for the students of Oceanside and work to build a school that is not only safe, but environmentally responsible solution. I look forward to our collaborative efforts. Please follow us, hashtag We Are Seagators, hashtag Seagator News.
Next speaker.
Thank you, Mike.
Next speaker, Ashley Nicholas.
Nicholas, if you could press the raise hand function, or if you're dialed in, press *9.
Okay, next speaker, Maria Vargas. Maria, are you here?
She's being added as a panelist. She'll be joining in 1 second. Go ahead, Maria.
My name is Paulina, and I will be translating for my mom, Maria. What she says is that we obviously want Garrison back, and I hope you consider working on the sinkholes as well. And Garrison just had big enough classrooms with a good space, and they were well illuminated and comfortable as well. It's really important, especially for students in special education and their teachers, peers, and therapists. For example, my daughter was happy every day to go to Garrison. She is autistic and has nonverbal speech impairment. The teachers at Garrison were excellent as well. Another example would be Mr. Michael Royal. Mr. Michael is patient, comprehensive, respectful, kind, and is always up to help the parents and his students by always asking what resources we need. His assistants, like Miss Christie and Miss Joanna, always take care of the kids as if they are part of their family. Miss Lena is also an excellent speech therapist. She is also creative and puts a smile on the children's face. Garrison needs its transitional classrooms back along with its other teachers like Miss Kelsey Price. She's a potential teacher with the little ones and also her peers like Miss Beth, Miss Miriam, and all of Garrison's staff. A reason that we want Garrison back is because the majority of its students are successful and succeed in middle school and high school. An example of this would be my oldest daughter, Paulina. She attended Garrison since kindergarten to 5th grade, and now she is an excellent and successful student in high school with a high GPA. She was also in Garrison's performing arts along with other students that are also successful. Garrison was also the closest school for families to be able to walk to and take their kids to school. There are many families that walk their kids to school every day. I hope you take this opinion into consideration, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Sam Sanford.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. President, Superintendent, and board members. I do not envy your challenge. School districts are underfunded by the state, and bonds that cover the full district's needs are rarely approved. A district's needs far outweigh the funding. So you have very challenging decisions on how to allocate scarce resources, and your hard work is appreciated. With that in mind, I'd like to offer the following thoughts and questions that you may want to consider as you work on this decision. Oceanside Unified is facing declining enrollment, but that should not be mistaken for declining population in the Oceanside Unified service area. Population in this area continues to grow, and with it, a growing portion of families with school-aged children are electing to enroll their children elsewhere. This is an unfortunate reality that the district must confront. The Garrison and San Luis Rey Elementary School challenge before you is but one small piece of the district, but it presents an opportunity to address the larger challenge of enrollment attrition. With that, I ask, is the option before the board the long-term solution? Does it help address the district's larger challenges? Or is it an interim fix and the root of the problem will have to be addressed by a future board? I'd like to thank the staff for all their hard work during this trying time in getting this presentation today. The modernization examples shared today had great appeal. It would have been nice to include the cost and the general scope of each of those projects to know how comparable they are to the proposal we heard today. I was fortunate enough to be able to participate in the public outreach this past winter. One outcome of that effort was airing out the challenges at both San Luis Rey and Garrison. Neither is perfect. Garrison, we know, has its sinkholes. It also has high voltage power lines nearby. San Luis Rey has high voltage power lines nearby as well. In addition, it has the airport approach pathway and high volume roadways immediately adjacent to the school. Little can be done about the power lines on both campuses. Likewise, the airport approach pathway and high volume roadways at San Luis Rey cannot be removed or mitigated. I'd like to further mention, as it was stated earlier, modernization is for educational goals. However, there are underlying infrastructure needs at San Luis Rey that I did not hear mentioned in today's presentation, such as sewer system challenges and mold. These would need to be addressed before the facility could be considered modernized, no matter how fancy it looks. And I am not confident that these would be addressed. Based on that, I'm in support of option D as the best long-term solution for our region's scholars. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Next speaker, Elisa Net.
Lisa Nutt, you should be joining now. The person with the name of Elisa Net has been promoted to panelist. You have 3 minutes to speak. One more time. Elisa Net, you'll need to unmute. You've been promoted to panelist and you're able to speak. You have 3 minutes.
We hear you. Would you like to start? No. All right. We're going to move to the next person and we can circle back.
Amy Soto.
Can you hear me? Can you just let me know, please? Hi. Okay, Amy Soto here. My 2 children, Adrian and Emilio, have been in the Spanish immersion program this year. And I know that you guys are aware. I've actually reached out to you guys, and quite a few of you have reached back to me, and I appreciate answering my letters because I'm really passionate about protecting my kids' education as part of Oceanside Unified. And here's the thing, I feel really resigned to what's going to happen. I feel like the last few meetings have really left me feeling like the best option that could possibly happen at this point is option 4, where my neighborhood is now assigned to Palm Coast Elementary. And I hate to even say that because I really feel like the community at Garrison and SLR has been so warm and welcoming to my children. But at this point, I don't want my kids going back to the campus at SLR, even with this mini modernization that's talked about with all the beautiful new look and everything. The fact is it's still going to be under the flight path of Oceanside Municipal Airport. It's still going to be underneath those power lines. That gas line is still going to be an issue. There's all of these things that you guys cannot mitigate, which make me feel like there's no way that's a safe environment for my children or any children. And I personally will not send my kids back to that campus. And I feel like we have to do what's best for our kids. And if there isn't a better site that you guys can get for all of our kids to stay together, then the best option is option 4. And I'm sorry to all of our staff that I'm even saying this because I know how hard you guys are fighting to keep us all together. But at the end of the day, what's best for my kids is not to go back to that unsafe campus of SLR. If that's really the only way to keep us together, I won't go back. And you guys will be seeing my inter-district transfer notice coming in the next day. And I appreciate everything you guys are doing. I do understand you guys are in a very tough position and that there is no good options at this point. But SLR to me is a non-option. And I don't think it's fair to any families, regardless of our situations, to put our children in a situation where we're facing hazards that are really detrimental to their potential health and safety. Thank
30
you.
seconds, Amy.
Thank you, Amy, for your comments.
Next speaker, Chipper.
Okay, Chipper, you've been promoted to panelist. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Audience member named Chipper, you have 3 minutes. Let's move on to somebody else. He was unmuted. That was all the children in the background.
Next speaker, Perry.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Perry, you should be unmuted now. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. So you can hear me, right, Greg Moon?
I can hear you, sir. Yes.
Okay, thanks. So my name is Perry Alvarez, and I am a member of the PTO for Garrison, and also more importantly, a board member for the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. In looking at this over the last 5 or 6 years and going to all the different meetings, not only just to promote Garrison to get it rebuilt, but now, of course, now we're with San Luis Rey. All the options, obviously, they're all going to have their ups and downs, but as a board member of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, I can't see this as being financially responsible. We have to look at the long term, as Mr. Sanford said. The long term goal is, what are we trying to do for this district and for our students? That's the long term goal. The long term goal should be that we should be looking at a different site, whether that is Buddy Todd Park, and exchange that for the San Luis Rey property with the city, or go to a vote, if that's 7 years down the road or 6 years down the road, whatever that case may be, then that should be looked at. The other option was when Josh presented the Zephyr property. The Zephyr property, which is on Mission and Fireside, was looked at as a whole piece. Realistically, we only need the piece behind the homes, not where the drive-ins were. And so if we were looking at that piece, which is about 14 or 15 acres, you could, again, eminent domain that and remove that. And again, looking at 5 or 6 years, however, it will be away from the flight path. We can have an exemption because it is outside of the flight path and not directly underneath the way San Luis Rey is now. And the only thing I can say is that, if this is and under what Dr. Soto said in different meetings, that 49% of the school could be touched if and not meet CDE requirements. I'd say if this is a 49% effort by the cabinet, then everybody should only get 49% of their pay, excluding Dr. Soto, because this is only a half effort. And so I don't believe that financially this is a responsible way to go. I think that we should look at the long term, as Mr. Sanford said, and I think that we should look at these scholars as being the ones who will take over the city down the road. And so we need to educate them properly. So thank you.
30 seconds, sir. Thank you.
Next speaker, Michelle Richard.
Thanks, Perry.
Are you there?
Michelle, you are on. You have 3 minutes.
All right. I didn't really mean to speak, but I will now. The only thing I really want to say is I am really proud of how the students from Garrison and San Luis Rey came together as one united school. And I wasn't thrilled of the idea to begin with, but my granddaughter came home and she has all these neat little friends that are special needs and she loves them. And I'm very proud of her. And I'm proud of the staff for making these kids come together and learn how to work with and treat everybody as equals. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Michelle.
Next speaker, Lisette Sumano.
Hello.
Okay, Lizette, you're on. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lisette Sumano, and I am a parent to a kindergartner who has joined Garrison for the full-time dual immersion program. And I was very excited for him to start with the school. And his teacher has been amazing, even through this thing. But I will have to piggyback on what Ms. Mariani had mentioned about the location of the school and wanting for a different location to be set for my student in particular due to the same issues with the airport and other comments that were made on that. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Lizette.
That concludes our public comment for item 3A.
Can we circle back to Alyssa and Chipper and see if they're still out there so we don't forget them? Thank you for your patience in this technology.
Chipper, you're on to address the board. You have 3 minutes.
All right. Do you guys want to try Alyssa? We're going to give it one more minute. All right, great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Alyssa, you're on. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just, I don't know what to say. I'm just very confused and very overwhelmed. I just wish that you guys can consider more of the students' well-being, which is as a parent of a kid from Garrison and now SLR, I wish that the kids were being more considerate of this and splitting the kids the way it's being presented. It's just I don't believe it's the best option. But I also understand that it's hard to keep them together, and I'm just very overwhelmed over the whole thing. And honestly, I just wish that there will be more help for the kids moving forward as far as counseling and keeping them more involved um, and giving them explanation of what's going on, and not just overwhelming them with information at the last minute, because it's not okay for the kids to be overwhelmed with information from one day to the next or from 1 week to the next. Like, this is what's going to happen now, and the kid has no time to process all that information in such a short time. And I just wish there was more help for those kids that have been through so much already, and there was more help offered to them, because honestly, that's my biggest concern right now for the students, for my son, for all the kids involved, is to give them more information as is being presented, and not all at one time and overwhelming them, because it's affecting their education. Can't um, they can't perform as well. They can't concentrate in that kind of environment. And going home to their parents and asking questions, and their parents don't know how to answer those questions, it's just very hard for those kids and for the parents. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Fine.
All right, is that our last public comment, or we have one more? We have 2 more public comments. So who's next?
Jacqueline Prettyman.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Jacqueline, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, I wasn't real sure when you guys were explaining the remodernization of San Luis Rey, if when that is gonna start, or when it's proposed when that would start, and our kids would they be moved to another school? And if they're moved to another school and they are at that point comfortable, will we have the option to stay at that school? Because then moving them again, we're a military family, and I'm just worried about, we've wanted to provide them with stability. So if we have a choice down the road, if we have to leave during this modernization, what options are we going to have during this? We live in the neighborhood of San Luis Rey, so we're glad that this family that has come together of the 2 schools, I'm glad that we're going to be united, but I'm also worried that if we're leaving the campus, they're going to be, if they're united somewhere else during this time. My daughter's in kindergarten. How long is this going to take for sure? And then let's say she's at another school till 3rd grade. Well, can she just finish out till 5th grade? So I think I love what the other parents are saying and their concerns about counseling. But I would also like to know that if we have to move for a period, will we get the option to stay where they're at to finish out of school? Because I don't want to be moving around schools all the time. So if you guys could address that, just let us know. Keep us up to date on what our options are as parents, and what you're going to provide for the kids. That is all. Thanks.
Next speaker, Jennifer Ligon.
Jennifer, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Ligon, and I am a instructional aide for San Luis Rey Elementary. And I initially was not going to get on and speak, but I felt the need to after listening to parents and staff members. And I just want to say that we came into this school year not knowing that we were going to be 2 schools together, and we have managed to make it work. And we have done a pretty good job doing it. Our kids have gotten along. Our staff is amazing, both Garrison and San Luis Rey. And our families have come together. I've worked in a school district for 10 years. My kids have gone to school here. I currently have one at El Camino, and I have two that have graduated, one in law school and one going to speech pathology school. So I feel that Oceanside has produced amazing things for my kids, and I can see that at San Luis Rey. And we have amazing staff on both sides that love the kids. And I just would hate to see them get split up. They've been through so much this year, and we've all worked hard to make our school one family. And I just feel like we were told at the beginning of the year that we were one school. We were coming together no matter what. We didn't know where we would be, but we were no longer two separate schools, and we managed to make it work, and we did a pretty good job doing it. And I hope you take that into consideration when you think about your decision, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Next speaker, Chipper.
Okay, am I muted? No, I'm not muted.
We got it.
All right, welcome to Zoom. Hey, board members, good to see you guys. Hopefully you guys are staying healthy and safe. Welcome to the world of Zoom. It's kind of crazy, but I just, as a parent, I have two kids at San Luis Rey, and some of the other parents have talked about how this school year has been rough. It's been rough for the kids from San Luis Rey and the kids from Garrison, and it's been a challenge. And then you guys as a district are faced with all kinds of challenges trying to figure out what the best thing to do is in this given situation. And just as a parent with two kids there, I'm really glad to see option B as the option that the staff is recommending. San Luis Rey is a great location. There's tons of kids that have to walk to school because their parents can't drive them, and that's a great place for them. Now, there are kids from Garrison who were walking to school, and this year they were bused, and so that is going to be a challenge for them. And so I don't know there's no perfect answer here. There really isn't. And you guys are dealing with the financial side, and the stats are showing declining enrollment. But improving San Luis Rey in the location that it is gives us the acreage. Yes, there's some problems with the flight pattern and all that kind of stuff. And technically, if I understand the flight pattern correctly, they're supposed to follow the 76, not fly right over the top of the school. So there's some pilots that are making poor judgments, decisions there that are risking our kids, but that's their choice. And so we can't do much about that other than complain to the FAA or something. But I appreciate what you guys are looking at. There's a lot to consider in this, but I'm really thankful that option B is what the staff is recommending, because updating San Luis Rey and then housing both the schools, Garrison and San Luis Rey there, I think is a great option considering everything that's going on. So thank you. That's what I've got. I appreciate your guys' consideration and your time and everything you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Chipper, for sharing. All right, does that conclude public comment?
For that item.
For that item, okay. So we're gonna go into board discussion, and in this virtual world, I'm gonna call on board members if that's all right. And if you wanna take a pass and we'll come back to you, just let me know. I can see all your faces, so you can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. So I'm gonna start with Raquel. She's smiling at me. All right, Raquel, unmute yourself and you can start the discussion.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. I have to go back and find them after all my notes. I just need to clarify, and I want to clarify to all our families too, though, because I know that we did state that we are not doing transportation. If we were to stay with option B, is it B? Yes, B. Yeah. That we stay with, if we go with option B, that we will not be doing transportation, because I know Dr. Soto did state that, and I know it's not already in the packet itself, but I do want to make sure that we were clear on that. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
I know we looked at also, I have a question because I know for Dr. Soto, we looked at for SLR, 750 scholars is the max that we can put on there currently. Is that correct? Is she with us?
Yeah, she's with us.
720 by the state.
Did 720 by the state?
That is a state capacity number. Remember, that is under the assumption that every space is used for instruction. It doesn't account for the fact that we as a district will say, we have this space for a designated library. We are using this space as a designated computer lab. It depends on our definition of what we want to have at a school site, but that's a state definition, and that is how we receive allocations for facilities.
That's 750.
Yeah, it was 750.
Right.
Yeah, it was 750. Okay. Now with the additional classrooms, because we put additional classrooms on that site currently, what amount of seating are we adding to that now? I mean, because if we say everything was good and we were back in the schools and we were back on site, how many seats or bottoms can we put in those seats that we would add space to those? Because we're right now, my understanding is we're completely cramped in the school as it is, right? So what kind of seating are we adding by those 3 portables that we added onto that site?
So
yeah, what's the capacity at this point now?
Well, there are 3 locatables that are there. So it's been site directive. One of them, I believe, is being used for space for music. So it could house up to the expectation of a capacity of a relocatable. That's an open space, so there's no seats in there. It's not designated as a seat assignment. These are traditional relocatables for a classroom, for a standardized classroom. So anywhere from 24:1 to a 40:1 is basically the capacity of a relocatable. They're generic relocatables.
And I want to clarify, Trustee Alvarez, that the additional site, the buildings that are put on those 3, that would be interim housing. So Jacqueline Prettyman asked about where would they be housed. And so during construction, they would be housed on the SLR site in, I don't know, Shannon, what do we call them? Swing buildings. We would have probably 6 total temporary portables put up. So what you're asking, so that's what would happen with the students in the interim. So as a section was being modernized, they would move kids to the interim housing. So I think the question is, the enrollment is going to be 539. So in the modernization project, are we going to ensure that we have enough classrooms for our students, that teachers have a workroom, that there's a staff lounge, that there's an NPR that can house a very nice and amazing theatrical program? I think that's what I'm hearing in the question is, are we going to have enough space instead of everyone being crammed in because we had to ad hoc at the beginning of this year? So Trustee Alvarez, do I have that question? Okay. Shannon, do you want to address that? I think the answer is yes, because it wouldn't be sensible to move on with a modernization unless we could meet that demand. So part of the projected modernization, and again, we'd need to look at this with the architects very clearly, and also we'd need to get staff input. But one of the pieces, Penny, and just make sure I'm speaking accurately here, is that we would replace all of the existing portables, because all of those are past life of age, or however we say it, age of life. So I think that's where we would need to ensure that we have enough classroom space, correct?
Correct. One of the first things that we would do is get a planning committee together and then hire an architect, and through the very first stage of design, it's called programming, and they would gain an understanding through meetings with the different constituents, what the needs were, the space that we have, and then they would do some blocking for us that shows us where the spaces could be, what it looks like, and the committee would be able to see that to make sure that we have all of the spaces that are needed.
Thank you.
Do you have any more questions, Raquel, at this time?
I actually do. Dr. Soto, do we have, when we looked at the modernizations of the other schools that we have done within their district, do we have a dollar amount on what we spent on each of those locations, about what it costs to do the?
We could go into the Prop H budget and determine how much was allocated and spent. Staff could get that together, not at this moment, but staff could research that. Yes, and that we do have that factor of escalation as time has lapsed, right? And so projects that were assigned maybe back in 2010, a comparable cost would be problematic because of increased construction now. So we would be able to pool how much it costs for each modernization project.
Okay, right. I think that's it for right now for me. Thank you, Dr. Soto.
All right. Board members, feel free to jump in if you need to with questions, having our district staff on there. I'm going to go to Eric right now and see if you have any questions.
Hi. Plumbing was brought up by a couple of different people, including staff. Would modernization address any plumbing issues?
Yes, Trustee Joyce, modernization would address all impact. So HVAC, plumbing, in electrical, anything with infrastructure, anything that would have to do to modernize and bring to 21st century standards.
We could also include hazards at the entrance that we currently have with such a high capacity visiting the school right now. I know that there was concerns about safety going into the merge. We could address those knowing that our capacity is going to be expanded afterwards, or I guess not expanded, but we're going to be at the current capacity.
Agree. I think that's one of the things that we absolutely want to pay attention to is a single point of entry so that we could control those that are on campus as opposed to keeping those off campus. Single entry would be one of the first things we would be addressing.
So safety is a big piece of what we could address with modernization. That could include protecting the boundaries more, which we have had concerns from family members and community members.
Yes, absolutely. We're looking at the property lines to determine what the fencing could also curtail and reducing the amount of interaction with those that need to stay on campus as opposed to those that need to stay off campus.
Also increasing natural barriers like trees and those kinds of things that could help mitigate some of the other effects around.
Yeah, it would be a very comprehensive plan. Landscaping would obviously be addressed last once all the structure has been established, but it would be part of the comprehensive modernization plan. Absolutely.
Would natural lighting be something that could also be introduced in order to minimize electromagnetic?
Yeah, I think that's something that would be wonderful to bring into this project too, is some opportunities for natural lighting and opportunities to address some of the concerns that were already brought up, and that these would be things that we would talk about during the scope of the project.
And I know the Sea Gators are performers, both on stage and this sounds like the Sea Gator News is a big deal too. Are there tech upgrades? There are ways to provide the Sea Gator News more of like an infrastructure for them to maybe that be a school focus if they so choose that to be a focus?
Yeah, I think that's kind of part of the idea of the other considerations is working with that staff to see what is their area of focus and what things would they like to see added to this project to make it, a vested project for all entities. And principal will be instrumental in working with staff and bringing those ideas so that we can move forward with it.
Okay. Go through my checklist here. So I just want to, I guess I'll briefly speak to the option that I have no interest in, which is dispersing the students into other schools. And I'm speaking to this specifically because it would create a school desert in this area where there are so many scholars right in the heart of Oceanside. And I think that that kind of decision would be not in the best interest of both the district and both our community and students. So I just wanted to say, just off the bat, that I have no interest in pursuing that from my perspective. As far as questions goes, a long-term fix, the health of all these upgrades, would they be projected to have a lifespan of 30 years like we would think of other builds where it would be that long before we would truly need to come back and revisit modernization again?
So it would be consideration for when we start defining what does the modernization project entail. And at that time, then we would be looking at the lifespan so that we're making the maximum amount of use of our bond funds. It would be typical to run projects that have the 30-year lifespan.
Okay. Eleanor or Mike, do you guys want to jump in? I think I'm not out of thoughts, but I'm probably out of direct questions for the.
All right.
I'll jump in. I don't have any direct questions per se. I think that staff has done an excellent job in presenting these options, and I think the public's questions have been right on. I too, like Eric, would agree that option E, though I think I instigated staff to maybe take a hard look at that. That's kind of the neutron bomb one that says, we really aren't adding any capacity in our schools, and in fact, we're at a difficult situation, and we should be reducing, or that we're losing capacity significantly, and we shouldn't even be modernizing any school. But I don't see the world crashing down that far right now, and so I think where we're at today is we've got to modernize some school. And San Luis Rey is the most logical one to do it. Even if we were to decide that we have to build a brand new elementary school someplace, it would take us 6 or 7 years to even get close to doing that. So we can't leave the San Luis Rey and the Garrison kids at San Luis Rey as it is. So it just makes no sense to do anything other than at this point in time to move forward with option B, in my sense. And that's all I got for you right now, kiddo.
All right, Eleanor, would you like to weigh in?
Yes, I'm listening to tonight and listening to the community as well as.
Eleanor, we can't hear you.
Parents have the opportunity to actually have input into developing a new school. And I think this is going to be phenomenal. If we really look at the infrastructure in terms of just the facilities, as well as in terms of technology, I think this would be fantastic. Okay, San Luis Rey can really be a 21st century campus.
Thanks, Eleanor. We got you at the end. We didn't get the very beginning.
Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Always.
All right. Well, basically, what I'm saying is that Yes, improve San Luis Rey, make it a 21st century campus, the infrastructure as well as the technology that applies to our modern day, 20th century. We're developing global scholars, and they need to have that kind of environment, academic environment. Plus, I like the idea it's a large campus, so our scholars will be able to go outside and play, be on the grinder. Yes, I'm very much for improving San Luis Rey. Thank you. Did you hear that?
Thanks. Yeah, we got that, Eleanor. Thank you for repeating it. This technology. Well, I looked at all the options, when you look at all of them, and I kind of do the pros and cons thing. When I look at option A, where we spend a lot of money on Garrison storm drain, especially with the addition of another sinkhole, and that taking up $13 million, and then Garrison scholars moving back to Garrison, so it's not keeping the Sea Gators together anymore. It, to me, is not an attractive option or cost effective at all. Looking at option C, where they address the storm drain, and SLR is what we put in asset management, and the scholars move to Garrison or other schools, that's going to take a long time because Garrison, we have to do the storm drain, then it's just going to take too long. The students that are at Garrison, San Luis Rey right now will not even enjoy it. It won't be done until they'll be on and off to middle school by then. So a lot of them. And then when I look at D, where Garrison and SLR are both placed in asset management and everybody's dispersed, I worry about the programs like the performing arts program. I worry about the C's program, the special education program. I worry about the two-way bilingual immersion program. You've got some very attractive programs at that school. And when you start dispersing people back to their neighborhood schools, I think those programs are going to get diluted. And I think that's what makes Garrison San Luis Rey so attractive. And when we look at the attendance and where people are bringing their kids into that school, I think it's the programs that bring them in. So D isn't really, for me, an attractive option at all. And I know because I live in the San Luis Rey area, right across the street, that we need a school in that area for the community school in that area. So having the school, when we look at the other options that didn't work out for purchasing property, they're too far away for these kids to walk and get to. And I'm still concerned a little bit about that. So for me, looking at option B, if and only if this modernization is thorough, because I don't want to see something that's just superficial. And so when I looked at the pictures, I worked at Libby when it was an older school, and now I've been over to Libby Elementary after a modernization, and it does not look the same. So knowing that we're going to do a modernization that takes the input of the community, the staff, the students, looking at the programs to develop a modernization that meets those needs is crucial if we go with option B. I think starting with the timeline, it sounded like we could, and Dr. Soto, correct me, or Dr. Vitale, that we could start sooner, like almost, not, I want to say immediately with all the COVID stuff going on, but we could start sooner with a modernization and less of a wait.
Can I say something?
The answer to that question is yes.
Go ahead.
My biggest concern, and I think being a parent, now a board member, is we've always told Garrison families and different groups within our community that we're going to give them and do for them and that they're our primary focus. We need, because we are a different board, we're a different administration, completely different from the past that we're here. I want you all to understand that we are putting our students first and foremost in every decision and any decision that we make. I know for me personally, this is a very important project for me. And so to want the very best for our students and making a decision of not separating our students, like Dr. Began said, is that we don't want to, again, shift our students from one location to another. It's not good for them. It's not good socially, emotionally. It's not a thing that we would want to do to our students again, especially with what's already currently going on. So making that decision is, again, one, not for me, but making sure that if we were to stay at SLR, that we give it everything and anything that we possibly can, because it is, the main goal has always been that it is a VAPA program, it is a dual language program. There are different things and there's things that are going on already with the schools that we want to continue to build them, and we want those programs to continue to bring back the students to our district, because it's what makes the district attractive as it is as a whole. So we want to be able to now I don't want to put lipstick on a pig. I don't. I feel like that's what we've always done in the past. I've been in this district a long time, and I'm not for that. And so I do want, like, Dr. Soto and your team, please understand me and hear me, that I do not and I will not accept the fact that we would put lipstick on the pig, basically, at this point, because it's not what our families deserve. They have fought, we have fought, and have made it very clear that we want the very best for each of our students. So we want to give them everything and anything we possibly can. So I'm getting really bad feedback. I want to thank you. I just want to please, I want our families to hear me and know that this is a decision that we are not taking lightly. I know for me personally, we are not taking lightly, and please know that, again, everything and anything that we do is putting the student first. I think I want to make that very clear, because I feel like so many people in the community and things that I've already heard and people reaching out, that we are not doing that. I know for me personally, it is my primary goal. So please understand and know that whatever decisions are made, that it is it's looking at every aspect of what's because it's, again, for me, it goes back to, for me, it's all means all. It's about every student in this district. It's not just about SLR. It's not just about Garrison. It's about every student in our district and what we do for every student and how we give them the very best as a whole. And Garrison, San Luis Rey, right now, we're going to start with them and moving forward of saying, okay, we're going to do what's best for these kids, because they are here from starting now on through high school. So that for me, again, is a huge thing. So
May I just say two things for that? Again, we'll provide interim housing for the students so they can remain on SLR. And it's a complete modernization. It's a 100% modernization, and we'll be able to, hopefully in May, if you approve the recommendation, as early as May, as late as June, we'll be able to bring back really a scope so you can see, what it is that we think a modernization is. But then it's going to be very important to also get staff input, because they are the ones who live on the campus, and they will be able to accentuate what we see as a total modernization. They'll be able to even accentuate that, and the board will be able to allocate funds. We've given you an estimate of a typical full modernization, somewhere between 17 and 20 million. So there will be flexibility, and you will make that decision.
I also wanted to, when I look at the community input, that we've gotten many emails as board members, as well as the community meetings that we held, and then my talks with the teachers and the support staff. It was really clear that they wanted to stay together. Like, in the beginning, it was kind of hard and they were smashed together, but they did such a good job that they wanted to stay together. And I hear that from the parents and the staff. And then obviously having a clean, safe learning environment that's conducive and modernized was their number 2 thing. That I know the third option that we got from the community was looking at purchasing other properties, which takes a lot of money first and time. And then building a whole new school would definitely bring us all the way to spending all our bond money. And we've got some other schools that need some TLC, maybe after this, if there's anything left. So I look at that community input, and option B actually meets exactly what they're asking for.
I wanted to speak again briefly, also to the environmental concerns that were brought up by lots of the community members. Immediately when we started talking about the different options, that was my first thought, is if there are any environmental concerns, then we need to make sure that's completely ruled out as a reason not to do it. And that's why we had such an important full bore study on the hazards that we perceived to be a threat, and even what we didn't know, which was the scarier part. And so that's the reason that I'm comfortable moving ahead at SLR, is because that came back as safe for our kids. That's a number. There's no other thing more important than the safety of our kids. And that study gives me confidence that it is a safe environment, number one, for our students to learn. I also share concerns about transportation. I mean, that seems to be an ongoing concern in general, but number one, we've got to have a safe environment. So is there any other comment?
Any other board member want to weigh in? Mike?
No, I'm ready to make a motion if the chair wants one.
All right, sure, I'll entertain one.
Is everybody ready for that? I'll move approval of staff's recommendations to move forward with full implementation of option B, which includes, among many things, the full modernization of San Luis Rey School and keeping Garrison together with them.
And
I'll second that.
all right, we have a first and a second. Do we have any discussion? Anything else? Go ahead.
I want to make clear, and Dr. Soto, clarify, it's a full modernization. We're not looking at a mini mod. We're doing option B.
Option B is a complete full modernization.
We're not doing lipstick on a pig. I mean, I just.
No lipstick.
No lipstick.
No lipstick. Let's say no to lipstick.
Motion was to include, with full modernization, Raquel. That was my motion, and to whatever the extent the law allows us to define full modernization, that's where I want us to go. That's where staff says we can go. It's not a pig with lipstick.
Is part of your motion, Mike, we might have to go dial that back, is to put Garrison Asset Management?
Absolutely.
Okay, it was full recommendation B. Do I still have a second from Eleanor?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any more discussion or questions?
So that is one thing I didn't get to comment on. Lost in this is a community that was at a school before, and I don't think we should. Well, I know none of us have rushed by this, and it may seem really quick in a board meeting, but that has been also a heavy toll of what we're dealing with. So I just want to recognize that community for keeping an open mind and joining SLR and building such a strong family and in an imperfect situation.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions or discussion before I'm calling for a vote? When we call for a vote, I'm going to go through your name. You can say yay, yes, no, or abstain. All right. You guys good with that? All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with Eleanor.
Yes.
Thank you. Eric?
Aye.
Raquel? That's it. I didn't hear you. You have to unmute. You have to unmute.
No.
No? Mike?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.
What was the vote?
4-1. Motion carries.
All right.
All right.
Have public comment for non-agenda.
We do have public comment for non-agenda items. So I'm going to turn it back over to Ann. Same rules apply. 3 minutes.
Our first speaker, Todd Madison.
Todd, you've been promoted to a panelist. You have 3 minutes.
All right, thanks, Greg. Just a quick note on Garrison SLR. I'm wondering why we don't use a small fraction of the 13 million we'll save and the 6 million we'll gain by selling it to provide transportation for kids that now may be a distance from SLR. I mean, that just doesn't seem right. But anyway, back to my original notes and what's actually happening today out there. The district's been doing a great job dealing with the virus crisis. Teachers and staff have been going above and beyond the call of duty to keep education going in Oceanside. We all hope we're back to normal soon, but there's speculation this may extend into the fall. We now have a golden opportunity to learn as much as possible to help the district plan during the summer and deal with whatever situation we find ourselves in then. It all starts with engagement. If a child's not attending to begin with, nothing else counts. I've heard not every student is yet consistently attending. A teacher told me he feels about 50% of his kids are connecting in on a regular basis. He's doing everything he can to connect with the rest and help them, but it's got to be a challenge on top of everything else they're doing. We need to support our teachers in this, and we need to do everything possible to identify which kids are not connecting, find out why, and address that issue, whatever issue they're having. It shouldn't be all up to teachers to do that. We need to make sure parents are in the loop as well. From what I understand, we're now taking attendance in a limited way, perhaps once a week. That's a great start, but why are we not simply using the system we already have for that, ARIES? We know ARIES works for this. It already notifies parents when a child misses class. No new systems are needed. It just works like normal. And it makes sure the parents know what's going on. It would also give us real-time data allowing the district to reach out to parents in person and find out what their issue might be. Engagement is all important. Do we have plans to give our teachers help with this? Perhaps we could enlist some of the support staff who may not be as busy as normal to reach out to those parents and help the teachers. Yesterday, I got an email from our principal asking us to please follow up with your student daily to ensure that they're logging in, checking their email, and completing all assigned work. You know how I feel about parent involvement. Nothing is better than that. But aren't all these things that the school is supposed to be doing? Shouldn't the district be letting us know if there's problems? We have systems for that. Why not use them? We would also get data that might help us design a plan to relaunch in August when we may be faced with having to combine distance and in-person learning. The challenges on this are radically different between elementary and secondary kids as well for both parents and teachers.
30 seconds, sir.
We need to learn from what's going on right now to fine-tune both. Why not use this opportunity to do that? We'll be in much better condition to reach as many kids as possible in the fall. Do we have a plan for this? And if not, why not? Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. Sure. And who do we have next?
Michael Rayel.
Hi.
Michael, you're on.
Good evening again, board members. Now I can go ahead and speak freely and see everybody that is here today. I do want to thank all the public that actually came out to support us in this process and provide and weigh in on this decision. It's a very big, important part of our democracy and where we are and what we're looking for in the future of Oceanside. I want to thank the board members for all their consideration and the thoughts on this. Although I still believe as an individual that I don't believe that this is the end to all fixes. And I still am not with the information that was provided today. I'm still not convinced that there are the existing power lines, the gas pipe, that it needs a 1,500-foot setback, and also the flight path that it's flying right underneath continues to be an issue. And I look forward to our conversations and working to address that. So I'm really going to be working really hard, and I hope that we will be able to get that information as soon as it comes out. In the document that I did send to you before, there was a timeline on the amounts of money that was being spent, that was considered being spent, but mainly the biggest concern is the amount of capacity that you are going to be able to modernize when you say full modernization, because under the current guidelines, it would only be under a 50% remodel of the school site in order to maintain current code regulations that was part of last board meeting. Now, the information that you provided today was a little confusing, and I look forward to more collaborative conversation in order to talk and get into more detail about what that means. But at the end of the day, I provided you a budget that is looking and taking from the information that is on the district website, and with the money that is part of Proposition H, other funding, and asset management, we have a potential of $109.5 million. And if you would provide $40 million to Garrison San Luis Rey, you would still have a balance of $69.9 million left over to modernize whatever school you want. So our biggest, I think for me, the biggest issue is that you're only going to be spending about $20 million, whereas you were saying that a full $40 million would provide everything that we needed in a 600 student capacity program. And that would include a visual and performing arts facility, state of the arts, because like Eric Joy said, we are performers, and we want to make sure that we're giving our students everything that's possible to be inspired to dream big.
Oh my God. No, I didn't, but I'm going to unmute you.
There you go. All right. Okay, we're all set. Thank you, Michael. So that concludes our meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Yeah. Yeah. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
To adjourn. We had a second.
Motion Bartel seconded.
All right. All in favor of adjourning?
Thank you for everyone that came tonight.
Yeah, we had over 156 people. Wow. Nice turnout. You guys have a good night.